was brutally hot, but I was thankful for the good weather based on the work that I was doing. So even if it were very, very hot, at least I got to do my work quite favorable. So, good morning to you. I'm happy that you've stayed tuned to us on a Wednesday morning. Every Wednesday, you are connected with us at just about 10:15 until 11:30 as we discuss your general health and wellness, what you need to know about your body, what you need to know about your mind, and also your spirit. My co host, good morning to you.
Good morning, Carlton, and good morning to the listeners of Q95 Radio. Carlton, it is a pleasure, as usual, to be on.
Yes.
And I'll let the listeners know, despite the heat, Carlton is decked out in dark colors. So I
Yes,
don't know if
navy blue.
Carlton. Yeah, I don't know if Carlton has a plan, but he he's decked out, and somehow I am matching him this morning. So I guess we planned it well. But yes, Carlton, it has been a very interesting week,
Yes.
and and today on
Yes.
Health Vibes we have a very interesting show. So I guess we're falling right in trend.
Definitely.
Mm,
We do have a very packed show for you this morning. It's one that's going to be very informative, at the same time interactive. We do have a consultant with us this morning. But just before we actually introduce the consultant, I just want to remind you of a few happenings at Jordan's Pharmacy. Firstly, tomorrow, Thursday, we are having our
you.
first edition of a youth health preventative screening. And we've dubbed it Youth, Your Health Matters. And so tomorrow we expect all young people from the age of 12 to 20 to meet us at the mega store in Fokole, where we will be doing some preventative health screening, blood pressure checks, glucose, your BMI, your body fat percentage, your I'm forgetting something else. There is something I'm missing.
Blood glucose.
Your I did mention blood glucose.
Okay.
There is something that I'm missing, but it's a comprehensive screening that we're putting together, and we do hope that many young people, particularly on the onset of school, would actually take advantage. It's a free event. We're not charging any money for that. The place is fully air conditioned. You'll get chairs to see it, and guess what? You will know your numbers. You will know your numbers. We will give you all of your results nicely packaged, and so you can actually take it to your guardian, your parents. And there may be cases where you may need to have further checkup by a medical doctor. So
Mhm.
that's happening tomorrow from 9 o'clock until 12 ish, 12 o'clock. We're hoping to wrap up by 12, but maximum time up to 1 o'clock for the latest. And that's happening tomorrow at the Meg Store. And it's a Youth Your Health Matters health screening that's going to be taking place. Not forgetting, September is Caribbean Wellness Month. We have a packed program for you. We will be letting you know some of the things that's happening, but I know many people have already been calling up and signing up for the sex symposium that's going to be happening in September, the 28th of September. It is a paid symposium, meaning you have to pay to attend that symposium. We have a very nice panel for you of experts, and we will be talking everything about sex at that symposium. As I said, it is from 18 years upward. So once you're an adult, age 18 upward, you are invited. We do not discriminate. If you, whatever or sexual orientation you are welcome as well to be part of that sex symposium. That's going to be happening on the 28th of September.
Mhm.
Let me say too that yesterday, and it's just a matter of caution, yeah? Yesterday, whilst we were headed to Kalibishi, there's a lot of work happening in that area, I guess, in preparation for the airport. I think they're
Mm.
breaking down a mountain or big cliff, and they have some really huge trucks. What we found is that the drivers of the trucks never horned. They drive very fast and they were not horning at all. The roads are very narrow in that area. And if you are a visitor and you're not so familiar with the road, you can guess what could happen. And so we are hoping that the authorities and the policemen in the area, the police stations, and the supervisors of these drivers would caution them, especially most of the drivers were Chinese people, and they're not using their horns, they're driving fast. And if you're not careful, you can imagine you can die, you can go down in a precipice. So I really wanted to use this medium to send out that alert that for the truck drivers of these huge trucks that are carrying dirt, be cautious, use your horn, drive defensively because the truck is very large, the road is narrow, and somebody could get into a major accident. So I just wanted to really spread that word out there. That was one of the observations we made yesterday, traversing all the way to from Roseau to Kalibishi yesterday. Now, it is 10:25. We are going to take a short break and then we'll resume where we will introduce our guests and our topic for today.
Oh, and if they say convenience could make a big difference, then you can trust me. I know just where you should be. And that is JP Mega, 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 Mega. The one-stop shopping, Dominica, nigga, 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 nigga. You could be shopping and having fun with your daughter or with your son. We cater to everyone. What a happy place, happy place. Oh, JP Mega, 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 Mega. The one-stop shopping, Dominica, nigga, 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 nigga. You could be shopping and having fun. Bring Papa and Mama along. We cater to everyone. What a happy place, happy place. Oh, what a happy place. Purchase 6 or more of any item and you automatically qualify for a discount. Check us out at the Mega Store in Fangole where there's lots of parking. On Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. On Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And on Sundays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. JP Mega, the best family shopping experience. Who say health cannot have vibes? Well, Jolly's Pharmacy is proving you otherwise. With Health Vibes, every Wednesday morning on Q95 from 10 a.m. to 11:30. Health Vibes, education, information, and a bit of humor. And not forgetting lots of vibes. Hosted by Carlton Langdo with co-hosts Jacinta Fagan Defo and Trudy Kristen. Jolly's Pharmacy is bringing health and vibes together every Wednesday, so be sure to tune in. Health Vibes every Wednesday on Q95 from 10 a.m. to 11:30. Jolly's Pharmacy, leading the way in healthcare.
All right, so we're back with you. As you know, on Health Vibes, every week we try to bring different aspects of health and wellness to you, and today is absolutely no exception. This morning, we have with us a very interesting specialist. It is one that is, I think, of the first of its kind in Dominica. It is one that many Dominicans may not be aware of in terms of specialities. Pediatricians, you hear about the surgeons, you hear about the cardiologists, you hear about, the
OBGYNs.
OBGYNs. But have you heard about the endocrinologists? Have you heard about the endocrinologist? And so we do have a consultant endocrinologist with us this morning in the name of Natasha Maxim Esprit. And she is our local endocrinologist on island. Many people might be wondering, what is that big word, endocrinologist? You may have heard about the endocrine system, like you would have. Maybe some people may not even be aware of the endocrine system, but you would have heard the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, the skeletal muscular system. You would have heard about those systems. Even go way back when you would have been doing in the 70s and 80s health science. That's what the subject was called then, before it is now science or HFLE. You would have heard about the health system. And so this morning we have with us a consultant cardiologist,
Endocrinologist.
endocrinologist, yes, endocrinologist, and in the name of Dr. Esprit. Dr. Esprit, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Trudy finally caught me. She's been chasing me for a very long time.
Yes.
So I'm happy to be here and happy to share knowledge with you all this morning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So just give us a little synopsis about who you are and maybe what propelled you to get into that particular
Into
specialty.
endocrinology, yes.
Because it is one that I personally would not have gotten into. I never liked, when I was studying pharmacy, I never liked hormones, that aspect. All these different types of hormones. I find it was just too much for me.
Too complicated.
Yes, too complicated. Too very, very much too complicated. But you are into this.
Okay, so my journey into deciding to study medicine began at the Dominica State College. So I majored in biology and Spanish. And my interest in the endocrine system began at the Dominica State College under the guidance of Mr. Hunter. So it really caught my interest from way back then studying at college. I did general medicine at Venezuela at the Latin American School of Medicine. And then I went on to specialize for 3 years in Havana, Cuba at the Institute of Endocrinology, which basically is the institute responsible for all the difficult endocrine cases that we see across the Caribbean. So it was a long journey, approximately 12 years of study.
Wow.
But it was I'm very happy that I did it, and I'm very happy that I'm back home and serving my country. A little bit about me, I'm from the village of Bellevue-Chopin. I am currently employed with the Ministry of Health, and my way of work is a little different than the other specialists. So I'm assigned basically to the entire country. I go to all the different clinics across the country. So I've literally been in just about every community. I can go safely to a home and have a meal in every community. I've contacted people from every different aspects of life. And I really enjoy it because I get to interact with the patients and we get to go right down to the nitty-gritty of the issues that they're presenting, the health issues that they're presenting. So I also have my private practice. So far, it's been a very interesting but concerning journey because there are a lot of issues that we need to address, not only in reference to the endocrine system, but just our health generally on a whole in Dominica. So I'm happy to be here today, and I'm looking forward to sharing what I know.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, we know a lot about hormones. We just think that we do not do, but we know a lot about hormones.
Interestingly, Dr. Esprit, and she's right. I have been pursuing her for a while because I feel like this is such an important discussion to have on Health Vibes, and the information that you will be sharing is so important for our listeners to hear. But interestingly, Dr. Esprit, before you even came back to Dominica, I had heard there was somebody specializing in endocrinology, and I had already started to, foresee the good work you could do because I was doing a lot of awareness efforts with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I knew from long before you even got here. But Dr. Esprit, I wanted you to tell our listeners specifically because I teach biology, and I know sometimes when I say what are the different systems of the physiological systems, the different organ systems, and people start listing. As Carlton said, the students would say cardiovascular, they know nervous system, they know the respiratory system, they know the digestive system, they know the excretory system, then they'll stop. That will be those that they know. And then when I bring up the endocrine system, they'd be like, Miss, what is that? So I want you to tell us specifically, what do you focus on? What is the endocrine system?
So the endocrine system basically is a system which controls the hormones. So in our body, we have endocrine glands, right? And the endocrine glands are responsible for secreting substances which carry out certain functions, certain chemical processes in our body. It's very essential. The thing about the endocrine system is that it is very quiet unless something goes wrong. Right? So for example, if you don't suffer from diabetes, you may not know what it being a diabetic is like. You might not understand the importance of your blood glucose. You might not understand the importance of insulin. But from the time that you are diagnosed and you begin with the ups and downs, if you don't suffer from, let's say, a thyroid disorder, you might not appreciate. You might not even, most people don't even know that they have a thyroid gland, right? But when you do have a goiter or you suffer from hypothyroidism, then you appreciate now the importance of your thyroid gland. So it's a very quiet system. It's quite complex, and that's why a lot of people stay away from it, because it entails a lot. And but it's of grave importance. It's of grave importance. And even as I go from day to day, I see even here in Dominica that we have a lot of endocrine issues, that are not being addressed, that are not being managed properly. And what we are facing and what we are really addressing are the consequences, the complications, and not so much the source of the issues.
And you've said that you've been seeing a lot, but just in terms of some of the diseases, you mentioned the thyroid glands, you mentioned the insulin, and I would assume that with the insulin, we're talking about the pancreas. What are some of the areas that the endocrinologist would normally deal with? So let's broaden it a bit in terms of all the different matters that are aligned with our hormones as it relates to our body system. And because somebody might hear you here and say, well, I'm not diabetic, I don't need to see the
An
endocrinologist.
endocrinologist, yeah.
But then not knowing, well, you may have certain other matters that may warrant seeing such a speciality.
So the endocrine system, its center of control is in the brain. Okay. We have two areas in the brain, which is the hypothalamus, which is what we consider as endocrinologists, the mother gland of the endocrine system. So it all begins up there. And then we have the pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis. And this is where the hormones, which basically control the rest of the glands in our body, this is where the hormones are produced. Generally, we have approximately 50 hormones being secreted in our body. Right? And they control over approximately 1,500 chemical processes in approximately 1 hour in our body. So like I said, it may seem insignificant because we are not aware of what's going on, right? But anytime one of these are off, then we begin to experience different consequences. We see the consequences of the hormone, as we like to say, hormonal imbalance, right? So we have, for example, I mentioned already hypothalamus, the pituitary gland. We have the thyroid gland in the base of the neck. We have the adrenal glands, which are located on top of our kidneys. In the women, we have the ovaries. In the men, we have the testes. So these glands, they all work in sync. They all work in a rhythm to release hormones to go to our different tissues, our heart, even our brain, our mind, even the way we feel. Our sexual drive, the way we grow, the way we sleep, all of that is controlled by hormones, right? Here in Dominica, in every country you go, obviously, because of the different dynamics, because of the population, because of genetics, the order of the endocrine, the most frequent or the prevalence of endocrine diseases may differ. Here in Dominica, the most endocrine illness that we have is diabetes. Now, most people, when we start speaking about diabetes, they begin with diabetes. We, the endocrinologists, we like to focus on the origin, what happens before you become diabetic, because that's where you see the disorder or where we see the hormonal imbalance, which actually leads to full-blown diabetes, especially when we're referring to type 2 diabetes. So we like to speak, if you look at my list, I always begin with something called insulin resistance, right? And even in practice in Dominica so far, it is very, very concerning, the levels of insulin that we are walking around with. And it's something, if you don't search for it, you're not going to find it, right? So I have been screening a lot, and also at the different health centers and so forth, I've been encouraging staff to look out for insulin resistance. So that is where I would like to begin
Explaining
what it is, because mostly everybody can write in Dominica, can write a book about diabetes. We know what it is, we know the symptoms, we know the complications, but little is known about insulin resistance. And this is where, especially with type 2 diabetes, this is where the problem begins. So basically, we know that insulin is produced by the pancreas, right? The pancreas now is going to secrete insulin, and insulin is responsible for, in simple terms, controlling our blood sugar or regulating the metabolism of sugar in our body. Certain factors can cause our body to become resistant to insulin. When something is resistant, it's not processed properly, it is not received properly, right? And that resistance is at the level of our tissues. So what happens if we're insulin resistant? Our body doesn't process insulin properly. It starts building up in our bloodstream. That insulin should not remain in our bloodstream. It should go to our tissues to help sugar, glucose, to enter our tissues, to give us energy, and to do all the processes that has to be done. When insulin builds up in our bloodstream, what's going to happen? Who's going to follow? Sugar, right? Because insulin carries sugar. So just from having insulin resistance, we're already seeing in the scientific world that individuals are developing complications of diabetes. So they are not diabetic as yet, but they're beginning to develop complications of diabetes. And one of the main causes of insulin resistance, especially here on island, is obesity, being overweight, because our adipose, our fat tissues, they do not respond well to insulin. So this is one of the major issues that we have when it comes to being overweight and being obese. It leads to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance on its own can cause a whole lot of other disorders. So it will progress into diabetes eventually. It can cause it could cause also that more weight begin, could lead to hypertension. In the men, we are seeing low testosterone levels because of insulin resistance. So for example, one of the other disorders I will speak about lower down, in the children, I'm seeing many children who are overweight, a lot of young boys who are overweight, I'm talking about primary school level, who are overweight, have insulin resistance, and then they have developed difficulties with the development of just their penile growth is not where it's supposed to be. The function of their testes, which is inside the scrotal sac, is not where it's supposed to be. So then they have difficulty when they come to puberty. And that all stems from insulin resistance. We better the insulin resistance, we work on weight loss, and they get better, right? Hypertension, 20-something-year-olds, hypertensive. Some of them not managed only with dieting and exercising. They have to be on medications to get the blood pressure under control. Why? Insulin resistance. When we search for the initial cause, insulin resistance. And let's not talk about polycystic ovary syndrome. This one is just, and sometimes we look at, we are trained a lot of times to treat the complication. And sometimes, very rarely, like all issues of life, we do not treat the root cause.
Because I'm listening to you there, and I must tell you, it's the first time I've heard a doctor, and I've been a pharmacist for many years, explain this so in such a way. Because most times you would hear, well, you may get diabetes because you're fat, or because you're eating a lot of junk food, or look at your diet, and it's merely based on those things. But the way that you are now aligning insulin resistant as the culprit, so it's the resistance before,
Right.
that is the resistance that causes the complication before even diabetes comes in. I'll give you an example. You look at me, I am normal, actually healthy weight. I weigh 167 pounds, right? And in 2020, I did an HbA1c. It was the first time I did an HbA1c. I decided to do all my medicals, and my HbA1c was 6.3. When I saw that result, I quite concerned. I was quite frightened. Actually, my day, I was distraught for the day because I was like, what? Like, that was a diabetic reading. And it took me days to process it. Yes, I know that there is a family history of diabetes, but I felt that here am I am slim, my blood pressure is like an athlete, I eat well, I do all these things, I run, and I was seeing that number. So the question is, what caused, what developed that insulin resistance? Because that's what I'm picking up now. It's a case of insulin resistance. So what is causing me now to have that insulin resistance?
Okay, so in cases like yours, and before I explain what could cause it, this is what occurs a lot of times, and that's why we do not catch insulin resistance. So a lot of times we would send the patients to do an HbA1c, and there from this we would say your blood sugar is normal, or you're pre-diabetic, or you're diabetic, right? But if we do not screen for insulin resistance, we cannot diagnose insulin resistance with an HbA1c. We diagnose with a fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin, and then we calculate basically to see if the ratio between the amount of insulin that your body is secreting coincides with the amount of glucose in your bloodstream at the time. So for example, you would have to do a fasting blood sugar and a fasting insulin, and you might be surprised to see what you find there. Now, insulin resistance also has a genetic component, and many factors, some of them can be modified, some of them not contribute to insulin resistance. So goes for prediabetes, and it's the same for diabetes, including hypertension. So just the fact that you are Black, you're already predisposed to insulin resistance. A man, you're predisposed to insulin resistance. Being over 40, you're predisposed to insulin resistance. Genetic history, a family history of diabetes, you are predisposed to insulin resistance. If in your childhood, right now you could be basically having a healthy lifestyle. So you're eating properly, you're exercising. But if in your childhood that was not the case, so for example, you were having a lot of sweets, you were not exercising, getting enough sleep, all of that in adulthood, you could see the repercussions of it.
And that's an interesting point about how health is important to monitor from early on. And Jolly's is having a health clinic for youth, so it all falls in line, because oftentimes we feel like in youth it doesn't matter what we do or what is done. We will think about that later on. Like, I mean, I'll think about health later on. When you're young, you're healthy, and that's it. But to find out that what you do in your youth might very well affect what you become or what you have in your older age, even if you are healthy, having a healthy lifestyle at that time. Dr. Esprit, we have had a small discussion on insulin resistance before on this show, and I remember one of the questions that came up, or one of the concerns, was the signs. What because we were speaking about, Carlton, if you recall, the darkening around the neck, and we were speaking about some of these things, and there were a few calls at that time about what are those signs of insulin resistance. So if you could speak to that.
Okay, so when we look at insulin resistance or any of the disorders for glucose, I always tell people, and especially if you extend it to the NCDs, sometimes the most common symptom is no symptom at all. Is nothing at all.
Okay.
And that is why it's important that we do our checkups, our regular checkups. We have a bad habit in Dominica that we do not do our health checkups unless we are feeling sick.
True. Yeah.
And sometimes by the time you get to the point that you're feeling sick, right, you go to the doctor, needs to get a diagnosis basically, or even present a complication. So the health checkups are, especially if you know in your family that you're predisposed to certain illnesses, it's very important to check regularly. So you know in your family, mother is diabetic, or father, you have a sibling, or even grandparents, it's important that you screen for insulin resistance, especially if you have other factors which may be predisposing factors like being overweight, etc. Or for example, women who had gestational diabetes, they would need to be screened. In terms of the signs and symptoms, fatigue is one, and that's usually one of the main complaints that the patients come to me with, that they're just tired and they can't explain why they're tired. They're not doing sufficient work in the day to explain the level of fatigue that they're having. So that's one of the signs, and also that heaviness and fatigue that you may feel after eating. especially if you eat a meal that's heavy in starch or carbs. Remember, the more starch, the more sugar, the more carbs that you consume, is the more insulin your pancreas is going to have to secrete. So if the pancreas is secreting all that insulin and it's stuck in the bloodstream, you're going to have that repercussion,
So-
and that's one of the expressions
And we,
of it.
and we normally call that niggeritis
Yeah.
when we look at
Mhm.
a cultural thing.
Mhm.
So it's nothing really wrong
Right,
about
so-
that. So,
so-
that is okay.
Sometimes there are other hormones which come into play there, which could cause niggeritis after we eat. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have insulin resistance, but it is one of the signs. Also, we could have signs of diabetes in insulin resistance. So that would be frequent urination, repetitive infections, especially in the women presenting yeast infections repetitively, or abscesses on your skin. Also, in an increased appetite. And that increased appetite links with other hormones, and it's usually at night. It's usually at nighttime that you crave. You would either crave something sweet, or you would either crave something salty. And some people may wonder, but why the salty? Is the salty is because the body is wanting you basically to reduce your levels of insulin. It's wanting you to ingest water. So usually after we eat something salty, you see how intelligent the mind is?
Yeah.
After we eat something salty, usually what do? We drink some
Water.
water.
Mhm.
So the body is saying insulin is high, sugar is going up. I need her to eat something. I need her to drink some water. So what am I going to do? Let her crave something salty. So she goes, she eats something salty, and then she drinks water. The body is very, very, very intelligent. The mind is amazing. Some of the other symptoms and bordering into complications, the expression of other illnesses such as hypertension, all right? Difficulty losing weight. So some people are really putting in the effort into losing weight, and they're going to the gym and they're eating healthily, and they feel like they're stuck. And a lot of times they're stuck because of that hormonal imbalance that they are presenting. In the young ladies, we're seeing insulin resistance causing an alteration in the menstrual cycle, right? So a menstrual cycle, which is off balance, which is not normal, can be an expression, especially when it coincides with being overweight. It can be an expression of insulin resistance, and we see that a lot in polycystic ovary syndrome. Physically, one of the expressions, as you all mentioned, so that would be a sign, acanthosis. What is acanthosis? It's basically the darkening of the skin in certain areas. It's most commonly seen around the neck, between the breasts, underneath the breasts, between the thighs and armpits. Okay, so as we build awareness, many parents are bringing in their children to get screened for insulin resistance, because that's one of the things that they notice, the acanthosis. And you can wash it and you can bleach it and you can buy creams. Most times it will not go away, because the root cause is the levels of insulin in the bloodstream. And that is one of its ways that it expresses itself, because of how it interacts with some of our cells, which causes the pigmentation in our skin, right? So generally, a lot of the signs of diabetes could actually be insulin resistance. So when you go to the doctor, normally they screen you for what? For diabetes. So
Your
then you
blood
end up
glucose.
with an HbA1c, which is either normal, or an HbA1c, which gives just a reading of, and even a lot of times your glucose readings are normal. So a lot of people say, but I'm checking my sugar and
All
it's
the time.
normal.
Yes,
It's
yes.
100,
Like mine.
sometimes it's 90 something.
Mhm.
So I should not have any problems related to blood glucose. And that's not how we screen for insulin.
true.
You must go to the lab, take a blood sample, and do a blood glucose and a blood insulin. Check your blood insulin levels. So that's one of the ways that we diagnose and we look at it. And I keep going back to the children, if you will realize, because majority of the cases of insulin resistance I'm finding in children and in young adults, so in their 20s. And I think the youngest I have with insulin resistance that I had no choice but to put on medication was a 7-year-old.
Oh.
I had absolutely no choice to put him on medication, because we were already seeing hypertension in that 7-year-old. We were already seeing complications in reference to puberty and all of that in the 7-year-old. So I had no choice to put him on medication. And it all stems from, as we know, from our habits from childhood, from the practices that we have at home. So if we could target and make changes in the children, then we avoid the complications and the development of these NCDs that we see in adulthood. So we don't have to wait until we become an adult to make the changes and to do what we have to do so that we don't develop these diseases and complications.
So the mere fact that you are seeing so many changes, physiological and chemical changes, hormonal changes in children, we've known that there is this surge of childhood obesity. We've seen the new way of culturalizing and socializing our children. Most of our children are kept indoors. Once there is internet, the average child that would have gone and spent a weekend by granny, first thing the child asks is Wi-Fi? Is there Wi-Fi? And they walk with their gadgets. And once they're in a nice little corner, quiet, with their gadget, granny, mommy, everybody's happy. My child is not on the road. My child is not, in no fracas with anybody. But we're seeing how this new lifestyle is affecting the health of our children. And many of us, I have a daughter who is overweight too, and she's 8 and she's over 100, right? And so I too have my challenges with that. How do I control that weight that later on doesn't escalate into some major issue, knowing the family history and all of that. And I suspect many parents are in that same boat. A lady stopped me some time ago with a 7-year-old daughter who is really overweight and she doesn't know what to do. She's trying all these modifications and it's not working. And I said to her, well, I seem to have the very same challenge as you're having. And that is a major problem. If you go to any of the schools now, you see that. It may be one, two that could have been affected by the culture. Many of our women and grandparents in particular love to see girls plump. They don't want to see you mega, as they would say. You have to look full-bodied, and they want to see you eat all your food and that type of thing. And knowing that the children are indoors more, they are consuming more food. We are at work, they are indoors, and they drink juice, they eat all the snacks. And
okay, so in asking the question, you actually answered the question. And the answer to that question is that we need to go back to the old ways of doing things, right? We need to go back to the times when we were more active, when we would walk more, we would exercise. Summer was going to the river, going to the beach. And yes, we were having fun, but we were burning energy, right? So all the sugar and everything that we were consuming, we were burning it out. And our lifestyle now, as much for the children as for the adults, we're seeing the consequences of it. We're reaping the consequences of it. The mindset of children is different as that of an adult. I could sit with you and I could explain to you, if you become diabetic, this and that and that and that would happen to you, and you might take heed, right? A child is different. A child might even struggle to understand what is insulin, much less for you to be explained to the child what is insulin resistance, what is hypertension, what could happen to you. Children have that fairy tale type of mind that I'm going to everyday play and be happy, and sometimes they do not grasp the concept of illness, right? So the first thing is that we have to attack it from a psychological point of view, understanding the mind of a child. Also, the practices have to start from home. So a lot of times we jump to the schools and we blame the schools and we blame this, but it has to start from home. So if we as adults are stuck on our gadgets and on the computer and our phones the entire day, whether we're working or this is what the children see, right? If we do not take time like before, families would be on the beach. Families would be on the road. Somebody's playing basketball, a father and a son riding a bicycle. If we do not go back to the root of these things, then the children are basically imitating what they see. No child will have a tablet in their hand unless a parent or somebody places it in their hand, because they don't have the funds to go purchase it themselves. So a lot of times we are the ones passing on the bad habits, and we do not lead by example. That's basically the plain truth. We do not lead by example. And I am seeing the results when the parents get more involved, when the older siblings get more involved. So a mother who is overweight has a young child who is overweight, and she decides, you know what, I'm not just going to tell her, go exercise. I am going to go on the walks with her, right? So she sees that I am helping, and at the same time, I myself am making progress for myself when it comes to my health. It's not just about giving them instructions and them leaving them on their own, right? So we educate them about what they should eat and so forth, but we have to understand the mindset of a child. You will tell the child at home, I'm going to give you your salad and you're going to eat this, but when they go to school, they're sharing their snacks, right? And then we are not there to control what they're doing. So it's very important to have that type of relationship and to break it down at a level that they can understand. But also sometimes we try to educate the children in a way where it seems to them like it's punishment, right? So you put the salad in front of them and they're not coming out on the table until they eat the salad, and then you have to, and it feels like a punishment
Right,
more
and
than
it causes
something
a
that
psychological
Yeah.
block.
right, more than something that you're doing to help, right? So we have to, and each child is different. Each child is different. I have a 7-year-old type 1 diabetic, and where I have to basically beg some of my diabetic patients who are in need of insulin injections. Some of them I literally have to, and all my patients in Dominica will tell you that they have 24-hour access to me. All of them have my phone number. And some of them, I literally have to beg them to put their insulin, remind them to put their insulin. I have a 7-year-old type 1 diabetic in Ansdimi, and that child, I have to stop him from measuring his blood sugar. He puts his insulin on his own, and he's on 4 injections of insulin a day. He understands that without insulin, he could die. He goes to school with his insulin. He writes down exactly what he eats. If a friend gives him a snack, I know that the friend gave him a conker and he eats. He knows basically even how to modify his insulin. That's a 7-year-old. So children are different. Children are different. Some of them will respond even better than adults. And parents know their children. So you have to know what tactics to use. You know, some children are very independent. They're very obedient. Some of them are a little bit more, some of them are more technologically minded. So you will have that child who likes to go out, but then there's that child that's just stuck on the gadget. And we can even use the gadgets to get them to understand certain, because there are programs out there that we could use to get them to understand the importance of their health. So it's a matter of putting in the time and putting in the work. It's not just about receiving information and then spewing it out. We literally have to sit and put in the work. Like with everything else, we have to put in the work.
Definitely. We have some callers and we really want to thank you for your patience. We just really wanted the specialist to expound a bit. Good morning to you, caller. Thanks for calling.
Carlton, good morning and blessing.
Good morning to you, my friend.
Your co-host, Empress, blessing.
Good morning, blessings.
Doc, Empress, blessing.
Thank you very much. Blessings to you.
Doc, give me your number. I put your name there, but I need your number.
613
613
5787.
5787. Am I correct?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, darling. I wanted to do a little research on Dr. What's the name again? It's Karen Nuwani Wiki. Dr. Karen Nuwani Wiki. You see that thing about because we are black? I am not, as a professional, sorry to jump in your lane. I'm not necessarily in your lane. I'm still on the sidewalk. I can't jump in your lane. Dr. Karen Nuwani Wiki. And, you know, breast cancer because you're black. Fibroid because you're black. Diabetes because you're black. Darling, I am just going to tell you one little thing. I do not want to confront you. It's not a confrontation. Please, darling, medication is being developed and researched based on the European genetic makeup. And you taking it, scientifically proven, you know, it's not me that's saying that. And you as an African taking it, it is almost of zero effect on you. So most of the times when these people train you and tell you that is what it is, that's what you're doing as a professional. But it is not necessarily true. There's a lot of racism and, you know, extermination, annihilation, genocide in the whole equation. But I need to come and see you, Doc, because I heard about you and I said, but how can I get a number now? So today when I hear you, I was going out, you know, I said, no, so stay until she give a number. So I said, let me call because I want to come and see you. Have a blessed everybody.
Take care. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Let me just give the numbers again: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. We have a caller. Let's take this caller. Good morning to you, caller. Thanks for calling.
Hey, good morning, Carlton.
Good morning to you, my friend.
Good morning, Trudy.
Morning.
And good morning to Dr. What?
Esprit.
Good
Dr.
morning.
Esprit. I just want to say thanks, Carlton and Trudy, for bringing Dr. Esprit. And Dr. Esprit, thanks for the information that you're disseminating. That's one of the biggest shows ever, in my opinion. The biggest show ever on your program. And I want to be all ears, and I'm going to contribute anything but just say that. Have a good day. I'm all ears.
Thank you so much. We have a next caller. Good morning to you, caller. Thanks for calling. Good morning, caller. May you... Good morning.
Hello?
Yes, good morning to you, sir.
Yeah, hello, Carlton?
Yes, good morning to you, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to you and Judy and the doctor in the house.
Yes,
Morning.
doctor.
You know, a lot of the issues we link to black people we need to be, when you study the history of them, they do not really originate from a general African gene. They a lot of these things are African American diseases that we, because of bad nutrition, that we have projected as if it's something black. You know, so because if you study the African continent, you go from Ethiopia to these different regions, you see the kind of nutritional portrait that you see. It's so amazing. You see a healthy African portrait in the Ethiopian hills where people lived on barleys and soaked food. You go down in the middle where there is nothing. You see people storing their things with salt and all these pork and all these salty things. You see a whole different, genealogical makeup, nutritionally. This thing, I mean, this is not the way that we keep presenting it as if it's some automatic genealogy. It's not an automatic genealogy. And we have to be very careful about how we promote this thing. It is the food that we eat, period, that is changing us and creating these conditions in us that make us have that following. You look at America, white folks, and you look at economic levels, you see the nutritional thing changing. You see even in upper class black folks, you see a nutritional transformation taking place simply because of better living standards and changing of nutrition.
Thank you, caller.
So I
we
just
take
want
that
us
point.
to be careful of those kinds of designations.
We take
when
that
make
point.
them,
We take that point. Thank you so much.
Yes.
We have a next caller. Good morning to you, caller. Thanks for calling. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, good morning. I'm calling.
You have a background, either your television or radio, kind of. Yes, because it's competing with
Yes,
us.
okay. I am calling with the information being disseminated by Dr. Esprit.
Mhm.
And first of all, I would like to commend Jolly for the initiative in having this program.
You still have that background that's competing with us. So you may need to put it off completely, mute it.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. As I was saying, I wanted to commend Jolly for this initiative, and especially recently that they had developed this initiative for the youth. Well, based on what Dr. Esprit is saying, which is very, very informative, I was wondering if, in fact, the show was not held, how would people or the citizens generally benefit from such important information? Also, she made a statement that children emulate what they see, which is quite true. And if I recall, growing up, we did not have the level of fast food that we now have.
Sir, you still have that background. It's really giving us a bad feedback. Yeah, you need to just put off the whatever it is that's on the radio. Put it off completely because it's giving us a bad feedback.
Okay, hold on. Is that better now?
Yes, we're not hearing anything.
Okay, great.
Yes.
As I was saying, that if in fact we did not have these programs, how would the citizens benefit from such important information, especially as it has been presented by Dr. Esprit? Is the Ministry of Health conducting any of these educational programs, which is so important for people's livelihood, especially now where fast foods seem to be the order of the day. Growing up, we didn't have that exposure that everybody must be lining up to get a fried chicken, doesn't matter what time of the day or night. Because as she says, it's important that the health is sort of monitored based on what the parental involvement would create in terms of preventative medicine, but also the foods that seem to be the norm are also helping to affect the lifestyles of many persons because that's all they know.
Thank you.
So, in my mind, I think it's important that it should not be only left to Jolly Pharmacy or to Dr. S. There should be an initiative by the government to ensure that continuous educational programs are available on the internet, wherever, to help the citizens to appreciate why lifestyle is important to their survival, especially in light of the fact that so many people who may be ill are unable to seek any kind of medical assistance because they don't have the means.
Thank you, caller.
And the
Thank you.
people being, isn't this an important area? I would like to know hear her opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take another caller before she responds. Good morning to you, caller. Thanks for calling.
Hey, morning to y'all. How are y'all doing?
We're doing well. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Carlton, I have to say, man, that program you're having is one of the best that ever happened in Dominica in a long time.
Thank you.
Because basically, you bring that kind of memory back, like when we were growing up in the 70s, 80s, and those, professional would come on the radio, and that was the Dominica of Dominica. And another thing I would like to say too is that the level of education and the intelligent people that that country have, it brings a joy when I hear intelligent people from my country, on programs like these, and can let us know that we still have a Dominica where we have people that can stand firm. But I want to say the main objective to my God is that we talk about the food of today. But I know we had generations before that wasn't so much into the television and the close neighboring friend, like, you see right at your home, your friend is in Australia, you have them in front of your television talking to. But these people still have diabetes. Because I had a grandfather who toiled, walked up and down, three lived to see a long time, but he had sugar, he had diabetes.
He resisted.
You understand? So I don't know if really the food, then we come across and play scientists by just saying that it could be the medicine. Then we say so many things. I don't know. I just think it's somewhere. And with the exercising make a lot. Because I know another person that was eating very healthy. And I know a Brisbane guy, I will not call his full name. And that person had said to him, that's that and that and that what he eats, and what he eats is not. And God forbid, this person went on just like that. So I don't know. I come to the, thinking of, it's something that we haven't really analyzed. Is it something that is just something that inherit, like for family, that you just want to have that? Or, yet again, we say about the children home and not exercising. But I know athletes. I know people that exercise and they get sugar. They have other high blood pressure.
Thank you, Colin.
So I don't know, but it's very educational, man.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, man. You all keep it on, man. God
Thank
bless
you.
you all.
Thank you so much. I know it's 11:12. And I really want to ask Dr. Espree, before you make comments on some of the things that we'll ask. There is this big buzz right now with intermittent fasting. And I'm glad that you're here, that we can address it, because it's a wave that is going around the world. I mean, you go on Facebook and you see so many pop-ups about intermittent fasting, and you see a lot of information from all different experts about intermittent fasting. Is intermittent fasting the way, because it is seemed to be purported that it is the answer to insulin resistance, or to diabetes control. In your practice, is it something that you've been seeing your clients talking or asking about, and is it something that you recommend? And is it for everybody? Because even diabetics are getting into complications because of this intermittent fasting.
Okay, thank you very much for asking that question. And it's not only with intermittent fasting, there are other diets and plans being publicized out there, and then without sufficient knowledge, we just jump on the wagon and we're desperate. We want to try certain things, and without being medically evaluated or advised, where we had a lot of issues, for example, with the ketogenic diet, right? Especially with the young women who basically, and a lot of times even the motives, because we even have to look at the motive as to why we do things. Is it really that so that we could be more healthy? Is it really because of image? And all of that interferes into the decision. In terms of intermittent fasting, yes, you may see results, but it is not for everybody. And that person needs to be medically evaluated. Blood tests have to be done. And one of the disadvantages with intermittent fasting is that it's not something that it's very, a lot of individuals, especially the young women and so on, they start intermittent fasting. But how long are you going to fast intermittently? Are you going to fast intermittently for the rest of your life? And to those who may not be familiar with what it is, it's basically your assigned periods of fasting. So let's say usually you would join a program, and then based on an evaluation, they would tell you you're not going to eat, let's say, for the first 12 hours, and then for 6 hours you can consume basically. So a lot of times it's whatever you want, and then you rest again. It's not designed for everybody. And a lot of times we go into these diets and these programs without having studied ourselves. Do you really understand what happens in your body when you fast? When you go on a fast, the human body is designed to go approximately 72 hours without food, right? There are actually tests we do in endocrinology where we place patients without food and without water for 72 hours in a controlled area, obviously, to see how their body responds. For example, a lot of patients ask me, but doctor, I wake up in the morning, I haven't eaten anything. Why is my blood sugar in 300? And it's since 9 o'clock the other night I ate. Why is my blood sugar in 300 and I haven't eaten anything? They come to the centers, the nurses take their blood sugar. It's HI, it's high, and they haven't eaten. And that is your body's way of defending you. Okay, so even when you fast, there are chemical processes that go on in your body. You may have underlying issues that you're not aware of, that you do not understand. So it's always important, anytime, it's okay to want to try something new, but it's always important to sit with a professional. Don't just take somebody else's experience and think, okay, that's going to work for me, and then you just go ahead and get it started. You sit with a professional. Yes, there are dietary plans that you could come up with, and a diet is supposed to be something that you can do continuously. The diet is part of it's basically the way you eat. It's not meant to be something just temporary. So my cholesterol is high, I'm going to stay away from the fatty foods, I'm going to stay away from this. As soon as it goes back down, I'm back to eating that way. That's not what it's meant to be. And a lot of times that's what we see it as, and that's what we practice it to be. So we will intermittent fast, yes, you may lose 30 pounds. And what happens after? What happens for the next 5 years of your life? You will see that you're going to put back on the weight. Why? Because you did not make the permanent lifestyle change. And that's why we keep stressing on the lifestyle changes. So not quick fixes, but lifestyle changes, something that you can actually continue. I tell patients, do not tell me that you're going to go to the gym and then you know that you're not going to be able to pay the gym monthly. Let's look at an exercise that you can do, that you can afford, because we have options. And that is the besides just jumping on the bandwagon and then facing consequences. One of the things with these dietary options, we cannot continuously do them, and then it becomes, you basically revert right back to where you started, and sometimes even worse. Right?
That is a fact.
I wanted to ask another question too before, Trudy. What role does the abuse of alcohol and illicit drugs, including that of marijuana, play in hormonal changes in the body that may include insulin resistance? Because it's a big wave now. It's like every other young person is smoking weed, who is having some alcoholic drink. It's like people fet, and there's a lot of that going on now. Do we see, is it that we may be, I remember Dr. Etienne saying a couple of years ago that we were at the precipice, at the edge of the precipice of a natural major CNCD breakdown in Dominica. Are you seeing these lifestyle, these social habits impacting some of our hormones in our bodies?
Yes. So there is a hormone we have called serotonin. And a lot of people haven't heard about serotonin, but it's considered our happy hormone, our jovial hormone. That's what basically keeps us in a good mood, right? And a lot of times these substances, they give us a short temporary high. So you have a drink, and in that moment, yeah, you may be feeling on cloud nine, or you ingest a substance, and yes, it may have you feeling that way for the moment. And then after, what it does, it drops your serotonin levels. Gradually, it drops your serotonin levels. And as a result, you have alteration of other hormones, and you also have a lot of young people. Sometimes we look at things on surface. A lot of young people in our society today are depressed. The person that you see at the party or at the fete, it's not the person you basically, if you had to go into their mind, that's not the same person you see at 10 p.m. at night alone on the bed. A lot of people have different issues that they're dealing with, and sometimes they use these substances as an outlet. We use the fetine and all of that as an outlet, basically, to be happy for moments, but it's momentary. Another effect we see is the effect of these substances on the liver. The liver is a very, very important organ. And sometimes I say the liver ALAS. Sometimes I say ALAS for the liver. The amount of processes, chemical processes that the liver does, and also hormonal processes go on in the liver. And then when we have alcohol, you have that poor liver, they're having to do so much, and then we still put in alcohol on it again, and we still put in certain drugs on it again. Then the process, the work that it actually has to do, sometimes it has to say, you know what, let me deal with that alcohol. I'm going to pause what I'm supposed to be doing with glucose, and let me try to filter out, in simple terms, let me try and deal with that alcohol that's in the system. And our body is there to defend us. Our body actually loves us. Our organs, they do a wonderful job, but sometimes we just give them too much work to do, and we treat them very, very poorly. But it stems back to us facing reality. It stems back to us being real and treating, like I said, the root cause. And you asked that question, I'm sure, because you are seeing an increase in alcohol consumption. We're seeing an increase in the consumption of drugs and illicit substances. But why? That's where we have to start. Why? Because yes, we may look at the consequences, and a lot of times that's what we do. We treat the complications, we treat the consequences, but we have to ask, but why? But why? Even before it becomes a health issue, to prevent it from becoming a health issue, which is what health is actually supposed to be about, to prevent it from, we have to ask why. So yes, they do play an important role in the imbalance of our hormones. The women indulge in a lot of alcohol, and a lot of times it's not a pretty nice red glass of wine, it's a hard rum. So I have patients, young ladies in their sometimes 18, 19, early 20s, who go out, and it's not wrong, you can go out and have fun, but they ingest very, very strong alcohol, and then they wonder why the menstrual cycle is off, and they wonder why they're having difficulty getting pregnant, right? And everything in our body is connected. Our mind is connected to our organs. Your pancreas is connected to your gallbladder. Everything. There's a rhythm that's supposed to remain in place. That's supposed to remain steady. And anytime we go off, then we affect a lot of things in our mind. Another one of the common things that's not widely spoken about that I wanted to address, and it's in line with that, is an endocrine disorder we called hypogonadism. I'm going to give you the two spectrums. So hypogonadism is basically referring to our reproductive hormones. So the basic ones that we may be familiar with: in men, testosterone, and in women, estrogen. So I am seeing a lot of cases of low estrogen levels and low testosterone levels in men and in women respectively. The most common being low testosterone levels in men. And how is that expressed? One of the first expression, weight gain. Okay. Another expression of it, erectile dysfunction, something that is very, very, very common.
True.
But because of the stigma and so forth, men, we don't like to talk about it, right? So a lot of men are walking around with testosterone levels not where it's supposed to be. And believe it or not, that low testosterone is causing that person to have certain other illnesses and complications, even right down to domestic violence. Because testosterone is very important. Testosterone is what makes a man, right? And like I said before, if you don't search for it, you will not find it. So a lot of men are struggling with erectile dysfunction, mood swings, you know, they don't understand what's going on with their body. We have a lot of men who are overweight. And what happens is there is a specific enzyme in our body. When the men are overweight, that enzyme converts their testosterone into estrogen, right? And then we begin to see the feminine features of the body. We begin gynecomastia. We begin to see even sometimes the way they behave and so forth. You might say, but why is that man so moody? He always angry. And it's off balance.
Wow.
And the same goes for the women. So a lot of practices, lack of exercise, a whole set of things that we do, our estrogen levels are not where they're supposed to be. And that predisposes us to a lot of complications. That's one of the issues that I actually see in the children. If you speak to the urologists, they will tell you the increase that they're seeing in cryptorchidism. So that's basically undescended testes. So we have a lot of children now where you palpate the testicles, you touch the testicles, and either one or two are empty. The testes are actually stuck either in the abdominal cavity or the lower down to where they're supposed to be. And one of the main causes of that, probably 95% of the patients I have with undescended testes is because of obesity. Okay, that's in the latter years. They could be born this way, but in the latter years it's because of obesity. And sometimes we've just working on it, and with hormonal treatment, they can get to where they need to be. So, like I said, there are a lot of unspoken issues out there. In the women, hyperandrogenism. What is that? It's the opposite of hypogonadism. So I have women walking into consultation. I send them to do a testosterone test because of certain signs and symptoms. And they have levels of testosterone in their body, which is equal to what a man should have, right? And then it's expressed in different ways. So for example, even in the mood swings, a decreased libido. So you have a couple who is at it because the woman's libido is very low. The sexual drive is very low. And then they're at it and they go to counseling and everything. But the root cause a lot of times is hyperandrogenism, high testosterone levels. So where in a man, it would maybe increase his libido. In a woman, it can suppress the libido. It's also expressed by an irregular menstrual cycle. Infertility. A lot of women in Dominica are suffering from infertility, the inability to get pregnant, right? And it's something you may not know what is going on in the person's mind, but it takes a toll. And it's one of the causes of depression in women, right? Because women, we are just naturally, instinctively, you know, that instinct, that maternal instinct is in us. So when a woman is having difficulty getting pregnant, that thing can cause havoc on her entire life, not just the relationship, her job, everything. And yes, it has to do with a lot of factors come into play there, but a lot of times it's just hormonal issues. That I remember my first case of infertility here in Dominica, which I work hand in hand with the gynecologist to address. The first issue of infertility, the first patient I saw with infertility, the only thing we ended up doing, there's a whole series of things that you need to do. The only thing we ended up doing before she got pregnant, she caught me off guard, was treating her insulin resistance. That was it. So all she did, she started exercising and she was on the medications and so forth, and she got pregnant. I was not expecting it. Was a surprise, right? So a lot of times the root cause, yes, the hormonal issues, and we need to create an environment where people can be a little bit more comfortable to speak about the issues that they may be feeling. So yes, a man might be able to tell you, I'm having a headache, and then he would walk into the health center, and then blood pressure will be taken, and yes, it's high, but he might be shy to tell you that he's having erectile dysfunction. And it's because a lot of times, because of the stigma, because we do not keep those things private, we need to create an environment where we can be more open with each other, with our family members, with our health. Because believe it or not, men come to the doctor. Those who do show up, because sometimes you have to beg them to get there. But those who do show up, a lot of them suffer from the erectile dysfunction. And sometimes I deliberately fish for the information. So they're sitting with you, they're in that private setting, but they're still shy to give you the information. So usually you have to fish it out of them. And so we just need to create that environment and find a health professional. If you're suffering from anything, if you're going through depression, if you're going through different things, and you know your body, and you know that something is off, something is not right, you find a health professional that you feel that you can trust, that might have the knowledge to help you. And if that professional cannot help you, he or she may refer you to somebody else. But we need to open up. A lot of times we bottle up things inside, and then when we address this is when we're facing a complication. So a lot of women, for example, they have repetitive yeast infections and so forth, and they're shy to talk about it. The teenage girls, and the women the parents need to pay attention to that. The mothers, we have a lot of teenage girls who walk about with yeast infections, repetitive yeast infections, and there are causes for these things. So being open and actually checking up on our health is very, very important, so we can address those issues. I do not want to leave before we end. I do not want to leave out the thyroid disorders. I'm seeing a lot of thyroid disorders, so the goiter, hypo and hypothyroidism, which is very common here as well.
Dr. Esprit, when we planned this, you said, an hour and a half is a long show. Yeah. I noticed on your list of things that you wanted to talk about, we did not get through the list. Yes. So that means it's the end of our time, but we need to plan for you to return a part two. Yeah. And the lines were going off, crazy. And we did not get a chance to take all the calls. But unfortunately, yes, our time is up.
Normally we would take an extra 5 or 10 minutes,
but we can't today
because there's a live broadcast just about now. So again, Dr. Esprit, we really, really want to thank you for giving us that time. I mean, knowing now that you're all over the island, we know that time is of the essence to you. But we really want to thank you. We're happy that your expertise is now available in Dominica. Your number again is 613-5787. So for all the people who would have heard, you may have concerns, you may have one of these conditions, you can reach Dr. Esprit at this number, 613-5787. And you can always call Jolly's and I can give you that number.
And the location of your office, Dr. Esprit?
Yes.
It's on Winston and Shoplin, Goodwill.
Right, opposite the
Quality Diagnostics Lab.
Right, and close to the Gospel Mission Church in Goodwill. So very close to the Gospel Mission Church in Goodwill, not far from Dr. Pascal's office. That road there, you will find Dr. Natasha Maxim Esprit's office. Nice. And that's consultant endocrinologist. So thank you so much for joining us today for yet another episode of Health Vibes. We really, really thank you for your participation. Until next time, as always, your health is indeed your greatest resource. Preserve it. Have a good morning, everybody, and do take care.
Who say health cannot have vibes? Well, Jolly's Pharmacy is proving you otherwise. With Health Vibes, every Wednesday morning on Q95 from 10 a.m. to 11:30. Health Vibes, education, information, and a bit of humor. And not forgetting lots of vibes. Hosted by Carlton Langdo with co-hosts Jacinta Fagan Defo and Trudy Kristen. Jolly's Pharmacy is bringing health and vibes together every Wednesday, so be sure to tune in. Health Vibes every Wednesday on Q95 from 10 a.m. to 11:30. Jolly's Pharmacy, leading the way in healthcare.
Right on cue. Right on cue. Right on cue. Right on cue.
All right, Dominica, we're here at the Expo Novelty upstairs, the Prevo Cinema on the second floor. And of course, yes, we are here, and the administrators are here, the managers are here to talk to us about Expo Novelty.